Yeah.
Hello everybody. So today we're going to be doing the practical is based on fingerprint development. So for those that are taking the practical remotely, the supplies that you are going to be provided with and we are going to mail out to you are a downsized version of what the kit is that we're going to be using for the three in-house practicals. So let's go through the kits themselves. So this is basically a standard stainless steel toolbox that we're using for fingerprint development. It's a fingerprint kit, so it has the general supplies for processing a crime scene and certainly for using it for our purposes in-house. So we'll go through the contents of the kit. It has double latches on it. It's easy to clean because it's stainless steel. Within the lid portion, it has a descriptor of what the contents are, both on the top shelf as well as underneath in the case itself. So we'll remove the shelf out of it here, the tray out of it, and we'll go through the contents. So first off, we use this as a reference so that you can follow along from what you've got within the kit. So the first selection here is the camel brush. So the camel or squirrel hair brush is this tool here. It is primarily used for cleaning out excessive dirt or fingerprint powder within the furrow areas in between the ridges. So cleaning up excess powder and other things that may interfere with the overall quality of the developed fingerprint. These were used as a primary fingerprint brush in earlier generations, but the quantity of powder that they could hold, you had to keep recharging the brush just because of its size and the type of bristles that it had. So moved away from these to more of a fiberglass filament, which we'll talk about momentarily. So generally, with the kits that we have designated three brushes for three colors of powders. So please maintain that concept so that each brush, in this case here it's a black fingerprint, granular fingerprint brush, is used with the specifically and exclusively with the black granular fingerprint powder. So there are three of these brushes. There's a black one, a white one, and a gray one. Now, when the brushes are all new, they are all white filaments. They simply get stained with whichever color fingerprint powder they are dedicated to use with. So each one of these is labeled accordingly, the cases that they go in, and to remove it and to insert it back into its sleeve, simply just drop it into the open end, just tap it a couple of times on the counter and it will slide back in. Likewise, when you're doing it, removing it, just bring it out like that. Give it a little bit of a twirl and it kind of spreads out, fans out the filaments. The beauty of these brushes, and they're exclusively designed to use for fingerprint development, is that they will, it's a soft bristle brush. It has a nice curved crown on it, so it can be used in a variety of different applications and different styles of users. But it also holds a considerable amount of powder, so you're not continually having to recharge the brush as you would with other types of brushes, as we've already discussed. So we'll get into more details of how to use these momentarily, but we'll just continue on with the contents. We have a black fingerprint, a black fiberglass filament brush that works with the black granular powder. Next, we have the silver brush. Same as the black, it's labeled accordingly, and a white filament brush as well. Next on the list is a magnetic applicator. The magnetic applicator is an alternative tool. Instead of using a granular fingerprint brush, a granular powder with a fiberglass filament brush, this uses magnetic powder to apply the powder onto the surface. So these are designed, some are spring-loaded. You can see that it has a center shaft or a center probe in it. and this one here is spring-loaded. If I let it go, it wants to retract back into its housing, the outer shell. So there's the outer shell, an inner shaft or probe in there as well. The inner shaft actually has a magnet that is attached to the bottom of it. So this has a metal surface on the outer probe. The magnet is on the inner shaft, which in this case now is within that metal tip on it. So the idea behind this is that it gets used in conjunction with a powder that has a metallic component to it. So the magnetic applicator will work in conjunction with that. We'll demonstrate that as we go through as well. Other components of the kit include a couple of color contrasting wax or china markers, and these are used for marking or labeling your fingerprints after they've been developed on the surface and prior to lifting. There should also be some type of a permanent marker, either Stadler or one of the other companies, Sharpie or whatever, to highlight certain areas of the impression and to mark them for a permanent basis. A pair of scissors as well, and then we get into the brushes. So, as I said, we have the three fiberglass brushes in our kits, the black, the silver, and the white, and they work correspondingly with these powder jars. Whoops. These powder jars. So we have black granular powder in this one. In this case, analytical gray, which is used with the silver or the gray brush, and the white granular powder in this. Now they are either going to be a talc base or a carbon base. You can see how very light and soft the powder is. It has an affinity to adhere to moisture within the fingerprint. So either sebaceous secretions, foreign material, or eccrine sweat, or other water deposits that might be part of the fingerprint impression. Now you'll notice with these jars that there's only a minimal quantity of powder in each one. The idea behind that is that it affords two purposes. One, it allows for the ability, and I'll just do a quick demonstration before we carry on here. So I have the analytical gray or the silver powder here now, so I'll use that brush for demonstrative purposes. By inserting the brush into this and doing it on an angle and slightly turning it, what it prevents is this type of action, which is going to potentially break the filaments down and causes a mess around the area that you're examining. So if you hold it on an angle and slightly turn it, it eases the filaments into the powder jar and without damaging the bristles. Now the idea is to simply just twirl it slightly as it's in contact with the surface powder, holding it slightly above and kind of spinning off the excess powder, and then now it's fully charged and ready to go. So we'll set this aside for a moment and we'll continue on with our demonstration. So that was one of the reasons why the powder is a minimum quantity in there, to allow a headspace that you are able to spin off the excess powder from the brush without actually doing it in the air. You can do it in the jar, more of a controlled environment. The other reason why there's a smaller quantity of powder in the jar is that because it does have an affinity to moisture, and with humidity conditions or precipitation that might be present in the air, it will get contaminated. It could even be with biological things if you're fingerprinting something that maybe is blood or some other contaminant. So rather than throwing out a complete jar of powder because it's contaminated or because it's started to break down because of moisture content, it's just is more a conservation thing. Rather than throwing out an entire jar, it's only a smaller quantity of it that's discarded. So we'll set those brushes, those powder jars aside for a moment, and we'll continue on. So we have the black, silver, and the white powder. I noticed on the chart here, the white powder is not actually mentioned, but there should be 3 jars in there. The magnetic powder is a secondary jar of fingerprint powder that is black in color. And we've only got a selection of powders that are here. There are many other different powder styles, types, colors, primarily for contrast purposes. Depending on what the surface color is that you are examining for fingerprints, you need the powder to have a contrast in order to see the actual detail of a fingerprint, or to notice that a fingerprint is even present. So for instance, if you're processing a white surface, you want to use a darker contrasting fingerprint powder, and vice versa. If it's a dark surface, you want to use a lighter powder. So the differences here between the granular fingerprint powder, which uses the fiberglass filament brushes, and the magnetic fingerprint powder, and you can see the differences here, is first off, there's a considerable difference of weight per volume of the powder. Because the magnetic fingerprint powder, which is generally in a smaller jar, it has iron filings, and it's a commercially made product, so the iron filings are within the powder itself. Because it has iron in it, it permits it to be magnetized, and so this powder is exclusively used with the magnetic applicator, also known as a Mag 1 or Magna brush. So with the center probe inserted and magnetizing the tip, it magnetizes the powder that's in the jar and picks it up in a ball like this. Now, that can be used as a brush, and we're going to demonstrate it momentarily, but you can also reclaim the powder by demagnetizing the tip, by lifting the shaft and probe up so that the magnet is now not making contact with the bottom tip, and demagnetizes it, and it reclaims the powder. I'll just do a quick demonstration as to how that powder can be recovered off the surface. If you have excess of powder that's present after you've examined the scene, you simply just remagnetize the tip and brush lightly over the surface to reclaim any excess powder and reinsert it into the jar. So again, we'll do a further demonstration with that as we go through, but just to reiterate that the magnetic applicator is only used with the metallic powder, or magnetic powder, and the fiberglass brush is used exclusively with the granular powder. So continuing on with our list here, so now we have a variety of different lifting tapes, and these tapes, they come in assorted sizes. These ones here, I believe, are 1.5 inches in diameter, and this appears to be about a 3-inch size roll of tape, and here's a 4-inch size. Now the tape is, again, it's a commercial product. Like many other forensic items, it is, when it has the name forensics attached to it, it costs considerably more. It has an appearance similar to gift wrapping tape. It is available in a clear tape such as this, or else you can also get it in a frosted appearance as well. I'll just do it just to show you how this is, appears. I'll just tear off the initial section here so you get a better view of this. You can see how crystal clear and uniformly applied the glue is on the surface. It is not like gift tape or packing tape that you would see squiggly lines of unevenly applied adhesive on the underside of the tape. This is how it is explained to me as to why this tape is so expensive, is because it has that ability, or that aspect where it is completely clear and unobstructed. So I'll set that aside. So the fingerprint lifting tape is designed for lifting fingerprints after they have been developed on the surface, and in order to retain those or collect those fingerprints, the tape is used. So the tape is applied to the developed impression, lifted from the surface, and the impression will lift with it adhered to the adhesive side or the underside of the tape, and then it gets applied to a backing card. And again, we'll expand on that as we go through. So as I said, there's going to be a variety of different sizes of tapes that are in there, and so if you are missing tape or if there are issues with it, please let us know and we'll provide you with a replacement roll. And that applies to any of the consumable items that we have here, whether you're running out of fingerprint lifting tape, whether it's powders, some of the other things that we're going to talk about. If they are consumed items and your supply is depleted, just let us know and we'll restock for you. Next on our list is scale stickers. Now, the ones that we use, we house them in these old fingerprint powder jars for convenience purposes, and they are the peel and stick variety. So I'll just peel off the excess here. They come in a variety of different styles. These ones here are 20 millimeter measurements, the graduations that are on there. They have a sharp contrasting black and white bar that's on there for sharpness and when you're photographing it, to ensure that the camera is able to focus on the targeted surface, and you can see the graduations. Some of these have a very limited area for development purposes on there, or for writing purposes. Some of the other scales are a little bit larger and afford more opportunity to write information on there. But again, we'll explain that as we go through. So these are simply just a peel and stick application, and we'll explain their use as we go through. Now, the black backing cards that we use are commercially made ones. We have clear acetate sheets that are available as well, but for our purposes, we will be using the black and the white cards. So they would be in an envelope within your kit, and they simply gives you that contrast. So as we were saying, when you're using the fingerprint powder for contrast purposes, so in the event, say you're processing a dark colored surface, you're using a light colored powder, in order to see that fingerprint, once you secure it, you need that lifted fingerprint to be on a contrasting backing card. So again, a dark surface, a light powder, the light powder would go on the dark backing card, and vice versa on the white card if you're using black powder. Now, on the reverse side of these is an area here that is designed for drawing a description of the artifact. Maybe it's you find fingerprints on a drinking container or something like that, is to draw that item and the location of where the prints are. Again, when we get into the lifting process and demonstration, we'll show how that works. And there's case-specific information on the left margin here, as far as case number, date and time, events, and so forth, for recording that information, so that now you have a permanent record of where that fingerprint was seized from, and who seized it and when, and the associated case number and address of that type of information. So the ones that we have black and white for sharp contrast. If you're using a gray fingerprint powder, it will give you contrast. It will work effectively on either the white or on the black card. That's more of a personal preference than anything else. There are certain powders, and I did touch on this before, additional powders that are not part of the kit. It could be fluorescing powders. They could be reverse Stokes powders, which again we'll talk about as we go through with some of the other lectures. It could be bichromatic powders that are designed to work both with a dark or a light background. It's kind of because it's bichromatic, it will work in both lighter or darker conditions. So to round out the remainder of the contents of the kit, there is a magnifying glass that's in here. Makes you look like Sherlock Holmes or whatever when you're using it, to give you a more magnified view of the fingerprint, especially when not only for searching for the fingerprints, but also as you're using your clean out brush to enhance the detail that's on the impression, to ensure that you are getting the optimum development without starting to degrade the impression. So it's just a useful tool all around for looking magnified views. Now, the last component is a roller, similar to the ones that were used for rolling out the fingerprints for the elimination fingerprints. This one is used for rolling out the fingerprint tape onto the surface, and as we do our demonstration of actually developing and lifting fingerprints, we'll include that in the demonstrations as well. So that is kind of an overview of what the basic contents of the kit is. A couple of other things just to consider when you are using the kits. If you're using a specific powder and brush, and you don't need the other components of the kit, please keep the kit assembled, keep it within the contents of the case, and keep the lid of the case closed. The powder is very light, it is easily airborne, and the particulate will make a mess of the kit. So try to keep them clean, a better environment for you to work in, more pleasing environment when the kit is clean. You can see even just from my contact with the kit, this one is in pretty dirty conditions, but hopefully we will have them cleaned and they'll be in much better repair when you go to use them for your practicals.